When I stopped worrying about everyone else's healing and started only focusing on mine, that's when I was able to see the difference. When you stop trying to force things on people and you just start being the change that you want to see, it can happen.
From To Be Magnetic, this is the Expanded Podcast with your host, Lacey Phillips. As the leading destination for neural manifestation, we dispel the woo-woo in order to help you create real, tangible results based on neuroplasticity, psychology, epigenetics, and energetics. Our goal is to normalize the practice of manifestation and empower you to get into the driver's seat of your life in order to manifest the experiences, relationships, and things that most align with your authenticity. Part of our manifestation process entails expanding past your limiting subconscious beliefs. Therefore, by tuning into this podcast with interviews from experts, thought leaders, spiritual teachers, scientists, and those with neural manifestation success stories, you're starting the process of expanding your subconscious in order to see to believe that anything you desire is possible. And by pressing play, the process begins.
Welcome back, everyone, to another expanded episode. Jessica here. I am so excited and honored to have on today Alex Elle. Most of you probably follow her on Instagram. She's an incredible author, breathwork coach, and writing and healing facilitator. She has the most amazing Instagram because she has so much takeaway besides her writing on there. She also has a lot of thought-provoking prompts and ideas and themes for the month ahead and intentions. She's so healing and she's so grounding, and she really just has this presence both online and on talking with her in this podcast of just digesting this really heavy healing work in a way that feels like a warm hug. It feels light and inspirational, and you're excited to dive in, but also know that some hard feelings might come up in the healing journey, and that's okay too. And really allowing space for acceptance along this path. She talks about her healing work, how she's healed with her mother, self-forgiveness, compassion, how we can reframe shame. We also dive into how to pull back that next layer of healing when we feel like we've done so much work in it, and how to take it another step further. And she also shares how she is self-nurturing as a mom and also creating time and space for herself and the importance of that. I know you guys are going to love this episode and love Alex. She has an incredible book, After the Rain, which I highly recommend, that dives into all of the topics we're talking about in this episode and more so. So all of the links will be in the show notes, and I know you guys are going to love this episode, so enjoy.
And now, a word from our partners.
So I'm constantly on the lookout for clean, organic foods in my grocery store. I'm checking the ingredients list, making sure they don't have any additives or products that are going to disrupt my microbiome or not be good for me. And I've been on the hunt for the past few years to really find the cleanest alcohol brand out there. Alcohol brands tend to not be very transparent. Their wine can be loaded with sugar, almost 40 to 60 grams per bottle. They can be added with fillers and syrups and sulfites and all of these things that actually the thing that makes us feel horrible in the morning, aside from the actual alcohol. And so I knew that I've been wanting to find a really clean alcohol alternative for some time now. And I was really excited when I stumbled upon Juneshine, our latest podcast sponsor and partner. So Juneshine is a 100% natural and clean hard kombucha. As someone who drinks kombucha, I always wind up drinking kombucha in 2 sittings because of the high sugar content. Even just a regular kombucha can have anywhere up to 16 grams of sugar, which for someone with digestive issues is not great because it can destroy the lining of your stomach. And so Juneshine kombucha has less than 3 grams of sugar per serving. This is game changer, especially when drinking and trying to have the best digestion and supportive system and not overload our system with too much sugar, which can cause leaky gut and lots of other unfun things. This was such a selling point to me, besides the fact that all of their ingredients are 100% organic, including their honey. It really is such a great summer and fall drink as the weather is getting kind of crisp in the air. Instead of having an IPA that might bloat you or make you feel puffy or uncomfortable, you can have that sort of orangey tinge to your drink with their blood orange mint, or even their tropical citrus is perfect for this time of year. And as we get into the winter months, their midnight painkiller has a bit of nutmeg and has a little more of that wintry flavor as well. It's the perfect drink to buy in our sampler pack online from them, so that way you can have a couple different flavors. Daniel and I love to use it when we have guests over and just offer them sort of like a sampler tasting of one of the flavors, and we kind of get to pick which one we are liking the most at the time. So be sure to check out Juneshine Hard Kombucha in the show notes, and you can get 20% off your entire order with code TBM. So I hope you guys enjoy and look forward to seeing your Juneshine. Cheers! Okay, so you guys have heard me talk about blue blocks before. I've shared how beneficial the eye mask has been for me in my sleep and sleep patterns, especially my go-to eye mask for when I'm doing my deep imaginings. But what I really wanted to talk on today was their Sleep Plus red blue light blocking glasses. So I initially started with their daytime light glasses, and I was kind of hesitant to buy the red ones because I didn't really have that much trouble falling asleep. Now that I had my eye mask, it seemed to come pretty easily, and I kept saying, what could this really do for me? I wound up purchasing them last year. I got the Zane sleep pair, which I think are really chic and cool, but that's just my personal opinion. And I started putting them on an hour before bed. Guys, I'm not kidding. It was one of the biggest shifts. I was so tired, I could not even keep my eyes open, which doesn't really happen. I usually am able to watch TV, go on my phone, and then my eyes are kind of like, ooh. But when I wore these glasses, whether I watch TV, even if I was scrolling on my phone in bed right before, which I don't recommend, I was still able to pass out in such an easy, restful sleep right after from wearing these red glasses. They're so helpful for winding you down. They're so helpful for calming your nervous system before sleeping. And I think the key is that the red light is blocking out 100% of blue light. So even though I might be putting, candles on at night, or I'll have my lights dimmed, I'm still exposed to a lot of blue light that is really telling your brain that it's high noon and not time to produce melatonin. But if you have red light only exposed to your eyes at night, you're not having that blue light come in, and thus you're signaling to your brain, okay, it's time for bed. And I truthfully cannot recommend them enough. If you have any questions about my experience with them, feel free to DM me. I love talking about these products. I use them every single day. I now have my boyfriend wearing the glasses, my mom, and my sister. They are all raving about it, and I'm so excited to hear your experience with them as well. And we have a special code for anyone listening, 15% off with code MAGNETIC. Again, that's code MAGNETIC, all caps, MAGNETIC for 15% off at checkout.
All right, on to the episode.
I am so excited to have with me today Alex Elle. Alex, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jessica. I'm really excited to chat.
Of course. So one sort of fun thing we always do when we kick off the podcast is ask our guests what their sun, moon, and rising are. Do you happen to know what those are for you?
Oh my gosh, not off the top of my head. No.
Sometimes people are like super fanatic about their astrology, and sometimes they're like, I think I have this in there, but I don't really identify. So it's always fun to see if people are, understand what any of their astrology is going on.
But it's funny. I have the Zodiac book sitting right next to me. I'm going to go grab it because now I need to know. Give me a second.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Perfect.
Okay. So there's this really cool book that sets everything up for you. I sent in my birth chart and all of that. So it says, so I'm July 25th, which is clearly a Leo.
Yes.
So it says my sun is Leo, my moon is Taurus, my rising is Pisces.
Oh, makes so much sense. Because the Leo, okay, and I'm such an astrology noob, so I could be totally butchering this. But from my knowledge of it, a Leo is going to be, you're comfortable, standing in your power and your confidence. You allow yourself to shine. The integrated version of you is fully confident in that space. The Taurus is loving design, aesthetic.
Oh, that's so me.
Yes, yeah. Visuals are very important to you. And then the Pisces is really intuitive and watery and can be emotional, but also very almost psychic in a way.
That's interesting. Definitely on the emotional side of things. And I guess I should learn more about my chart because I only know I'm a Leo and I'm oh yeah, that's me all the way.
The more I learn about it, it's just fun to have those little systems every now and again. And It's fun to see oh, wow, that is pretty accurate. How did they know that about it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so another question that we like to kick off with too is what is your cultural background and upbringing and how did that help impact who you are today? So getting deep right away.
I'm a Black woman. And it's interesting because we are Black Americans. And so I always kind of felt like I didn't necessarily grow up with a specific grasp on culture like my other Black friends who may have been Caribbean or African. And so it's so funny you asked me that question. I talked about this in my book, After the Rain, in chapter called Identity, this exact thing. It shaped me by making me curious about what it means to be a Black American. And I'm a mother of 3 daughters, and me and my husband are really committed to making sure that they know that their Black is beautiful and there is beauty and culture in that and setting and starting our own traditions and what that means. And so I think I'm still trying to figure that out. I am very proud of who I am and where I come from. And so just trying to tap into that deeper, learning more about my ancestors and those who came before us, what that means and who they are. What's really funny is that my husband, his sister is the family historian, which is so awesome. And she's been able to trace back and find pictures of their great, great, great ancestors. And it's wild to see. And I'm an only child, so I don't really have access to that. I don't know my biological father's side of the family. And my mom and grandmother just really now started sharing photos that they have from their upbringing. So I think it's all coming full circle, and it's definitely still something I'm growing to know.
I really love how you said that you're creating your own traditions and rituals within your family and figuring out how to both sort of honor the past, but then creating new things going forward as, setting the new paradigm for the family and what future generations can honor too. That's really beautiful.
Thank you.
So one thing, you mentioned this on your daily walk this morning on Instagram, which I think is so cool. I'm obsessed with walking. And every time I see someone sharing a walk, I'm oh, that's a sign I need to get outside right now. Mm-hmm. But you mentioned I'm committed to change. And I think, the seasons, and you talk about this in your book After the Rain too, about the cyclical nature of the seasons and how there's, the life, death, rebirth sort of cycle. And One piece from the book that I really loved is you said, if I were a tree, I'd be scared out of my mind that my leaves would never return. And I was like,
Facts.
I would for sure be a scared tree to lose her leaves. How do you handle change? How do you see change? And does it get any easier?
I used to handle change by like turning away from it and acting like it didn't exist. So then I just wouldn't change, and that did not serve me. And so it wasn't until I started seeing change as this teacher, as this ability to learn, be open, be understanding with myself and with others. It wasn't until then that I was really able to see the power in it. And it doesn't get any easier for me. I'm pretty much a creature of habit. So I like things how I like them. And when change happens, it makes my anxiety go through the roof. It also makes me feel out of control, which as a student of life, I have learned that we are never in control. And so there's another lesson that change presents. So you mentioned the morning walk, and this is my day 4 of getting up every morning early and walking by myself. And I was inspired to do so by this avid walker named Libby Delana. And she has a book called Do Walk. And I've listened to it 3 times. I've been listening to it again on my walks. Getting up and getting moving has been, even after just 4 days, has felt so good and has been such a needed change to get up before my children, to get out the door, to stop, making excuses about why I haven't gotten up, or to stop putting myself last in the wanting to get up but not getting up because, oh my gosh, sleep. Should I sleep in with my toddlers, or should I get up and get moving and risk waking them up? You know what I mean? So it's like all these different moving parts. And really, for me, they've all been excuses as to why I haven't shown up for myself. And my morning walk has really helped, even though, like I mentioned, it's only been a few days, but it's clearly been needed. And with the seasons changing here in the DC area, I'm really excited to see what else I notice on my walks as I continue them every day.
I was watching a live of yours the other day, and you said something on, I can get rest by staying in bed with my toddlers longer, or I can get another type of rest through this time alone with myself and the walking. And that really struck a chord. Sometimes we're like, yes, sleep is so important. We need so many hours of sleep. And that is very true. But sometimes just giving ourselves that self-care, that moment alone, that time to process our thoughts, that time in nature, that's the rest too. And I feel like we sometimes justify it as like, yeah, but the sleep, I need that first.
And it's like, are we making excuses or are we taking care of ourselves? And we know the difference. We know the difference between self-nurturing and, dragging our feet. And for me, it was, okay, girl, you're dragging your feet. You haven't been up and moving. Sometimes I just feel so stuck. I mean, I work from home. We have kids at home. COVID happened and like life really changed. And it's like, how do I nurture myself? How do I nourish myself while leaning into this change? And a lot of times that looks like, before I started walking earlier this week, it looked like getting dressed, getting in the bathroom, washing my face, brushing my teeth, like not putting that off, not coming downstairs and having my coffee first, but really having a moment to like take care of my personal hygiene without being bothered by kids or, by the distractions of email. Because when I hit the kitchen and get this coffee in me, it's like, okay, work starts. And so allowing myself pace and moments of pause in the basics has been a lifesaver, especially during this time. Getting back to basics has been self-care for me.
Yeah, talk a little about too, because we have a lot of moms or new moms in the community. How has your self-care practice shifted with kids, with 3 kids? Oh my goodness, especially during COVID and everyone in the home and all of those types of things. And just even through the different cycles with your kids, how has that self-care practice grown or evolved over time?
To be honest, I've kind of shifted away from using self-care as much because it took on a new form for me during the pandemic. And I started leaning more towards like self-nurturing and self-restoration, especially because we have a 13-year-old, we have a 3.5-year-old, and we have a newly 2-year-old. And so I need to nurture myself like I nurture my kids. And I also need to restore so that I can show up in my life as my best self. And there were moments, and there still can be moments sometimes where like motherhood, parenthood, it is so hard. And you're like, who was that today? Like I was not my best self today. And giving ourselves grace through that, giving ourselves understanding through, feeling off or feeling tired or drained or just not wanting to show up. Of course, we're parents. We have to show up and take care of our kids, but we also have to show up and take care of ourselves. Because if we are empty, if we are not well, our children are not their best. If we are not well, if we are not rested, our children see that and we are the example that they have. And so I think a reminder that I just try to give myself, along with lots of grace, is that leading by example is really important. And it's something I didn't have growing up. And I want my children to know and see that they are loved and nurtured, not only by the way that we speak to them and treat them, but by the way we speak and treat ourselves. So me and my husband are like a work in progress always. And so self-care or self-nurturing really does look like time away. It looks like morning walks. It looks like Ryan going to, shoot the basketball in the evenings after being full-time dad while I've been working throughout the day. It really looks like personal time and making sure we're getting enough water and that we're eating well and all of these different things that sometimes we take for granted because we're moving so fast that we forget to nourish and nurture and get back to basics.
I think that's so beautiful and so perfect too, because it's almost like Brene Brown talks about like being in the arena. And it's sort of that moment of like, how can you continue to show up day after day, moment after moment, when today maybe wasn't the best day? Okay, how do we come back tomorrow and try to navigate from a different light, a different perspective? And I always find too, I loved when you said, who was that person today? Whenever I have those moments, I look back, I'm like, that was an old version of me that showed up. It really reminds me how hard it is to have compassion and forgiveness in those moments when we recognize that old version popping up, because we immediately want to be like, oh, I'm back there. What? Like, I never changed at all. What happened? But that forgiveness piece, and you talk on this a lot, even the theme of that's how we take our power back. How do you, and you had a great post on this on Instagram the other day that we'll definitely share on the show notes. Everyone should look at it and save it for future reference. But how do you practice self-forgiveness and self-compassion?
Oh my goodness. I mean, it's a daily practice. And I think the biggest thing for me when I think about self-forgiveness is holding myself accountable and not holding myself hostage. So like moving in tandem with both of those things and knowing that life is a series of lessons and sometimes I'll get it right and sometimes I won't. And sometimes I'll learn from the last mistake and sometimes I won't. The goal and the hope is to keep changing, learning, and evolving, even when we get it wrong. The hope is that we don't hate ourselves at the end of our lives, at least for me. And as someone who's walked through trauma and really devastating things that could easily and have shaped me, but could easily have been my narrative forever, choosing to forgive myself, choosing to not abandon myself, choosing to not to blame myself, especially for the things I had no control over, is this sense of self-forgiveness. It's this, the step in the direction toward healing as a whole. And so I think I lean towards self-forgiveness every day because there are things that pop up that I thought I healed from. And I'm like, oh, I am so pissed at myself for that. even though that thing could have happened 10 years ago. And it's like, well, that happened and now you're here. So what is holding yourself hostage going to do? So it's a daily practice. Self-forgiveness is a daily practice. It's a really challenging one.
Yes.
But it must be practiced.
It's so true. And the perfectionism plays in so heavy in that process, because in order to forgive yourself, you have to, like you said, hold yourself accountable, admit to flaws and faults. But the part of our brains that want to keep us perfectionists because we think that that will keep us safe in a world that we can control, which we can't control, then that's opposing that part of ourselves. It's saying, oh, not only did you mess up, you messed up and this and that and the other thing, and now we have to take accountability and feel about it. And it's almost like the perfectionism tries to either not look at it, or it looks at it and then it just berates us inside. There's like another level to the forgiveness when you also have that perfectionism playing out in your mind.
Yeah, and perfectionism is just a beast that needs to be tamed. I always tell my students when they start their Writing to Heal coursework with me that perfection is not welcomed here. Leave it at the door. It can watch, but it cannot come in, because we want flaws here, because we learn so much from our flaws. And we are flawed human beings. We all struggle. We all drop the ball. We all make mistakes. And carrying perfectionism into your practice is not going to be supportive. And so taking time and remembering that perfection isn't welcomed here, I'd like to see your flaws, is a part of the journey and a part of the learning.
I want to repeat that like one bit of what you said on loop forever. Like, it's not welcome here. We're going to fail. It's okay. This is normal. It's so needed.
Yeah.
Going back to a bit you said on carrying these things that you thought you healed, but you need deeper healing now, or maybe you need to look at it from a different way, old patterns, ways of being, reactions, etc. What does that next level of healing look like? Like, if you've already faced it, you're doing the inner child work, you're doing shadow work, you're, really whatever your method of healing is, you've really faced it and now it's popping up again. How do you begin to tackle being alerted that there's more work there to be done?
I think it's more for me about what else can I learn from this? What else do I need to learn from this? Where am I hurting? How am I feeling? What is this trying to show me? So instead of villainizing the resurfacing or the re-triggering or whatever words that we want to use, instead of villainizing it, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I like to befriend it and see what it's trying to teach me. And a lot of that looks like journaling. A lot of that looks like inner dialogue conversations, or even voice note conversations that I may jot down or, record, and listening to myself. Because I think a lot of what we miss in our healing work is actually listening to ourselves, not just healing, but listening to the healing, listening to the pain, listening to the fear, and getting curious about it versus turning our backs on it. And I hear that a lot when I'm teaching, especially about writing, and when we're doing inner child healing work and nurturing work. It's like, wow, I'd rather not go there. I thought I healed from that. I went to therapy for that. I have gathered myself. I am fine. But why am I feeling tender about it? And a lot of the things, I call them pain points to my students and to myself. I'm like, what? This pain point is like throbbing right now. What is that about? Why did that blue car trigger me when it drove by? Like, just little things. And if we peel back the layers and we pay attention and we listen without trying to solve, but just listen, we can find answers. And then sometimes we don't find our answers, and the thing might just be tender forever. And I think not a lot of people talk about healing being a forever thing and some things being tender pain points until we leave this earth. And that doesn't mean you're unhealed. That doesn't mean you're broken. That doesn't mean you're damaged. But it does mean that that thing might just be super painful forever. And no one wants to hear that. And I feel you. I mean, that's kind of depressing. Like, we don't want to hear that. But when that pain surfaces, how do we self-soothe? How do we comfort ourselves? How do we not turn away, and how do we turn toward? And an example of this is I remember talking to my husband whose mom passed away some years ago now. And I remember him saying, like, this is never going to not hurt. I'm never going to be healed from my mom dying. That was so major to hear and so real to hear, because so often we try to put bandages over the things that hurt, even death, even the loss of loved ones. And then we're just expected to just move on. And something that I like to teach and practice is not moving on, but like moving through things, even when it may be tender for a while or forever.
Totally. I think grief is definitely one of those things that there's no shiny journal prompts that are going to remove the weight of grief, and even processing death in general too. Like, there can always be a pain point around that for so many people, arguably for all of us in some way or another. And it's not the let's get rid of this pain. It's let's figure out how to live with this pain in a way that we can still be our best self, live in authenticity, live in happiness and joy. You know, like, how do we still work with this emotion that's counterintuitive to the emotions we're trying to embody in the moment?
Mm-hmm. I agree with all of that. And I really think too that it requires a self-love. And I don't like to say this, but like, not in the cheesy way, not in an Instagram post way,
Yes.
but like real self-love, self-nurturing type of way. And that is a practice in itself too, you know, especially when we don't want to hold the pain. We don't want to sit with it. We don't want to sit and think about what's hurting us. But I think it's important, because I think that is where we find a different type of self-love, a more evolved version of self-love and comfort and self-soothing. A friend of mine just had twins, and she went into preterm labor and was really looking forward to her birth. But, you know, things changed. Like, things had to move very fast because she went into preterm labor. And we were talking the other day, and she was saying how she can't even look at their newborn pictures. I mean, everyone is home and safe now and healing and well. But she said, I can't even look at their newborn pictures because I am so traumatized by grief in that moment. She's like, I struggle with like feeling grateful and also deeply grieving. And so she's now in her practice of healing and finding ways to comfort herself, finding ways to love herself through this really challenging pregnancy, challenging birth, you know, being able to celebrate that she's alive and well, and so are her babies. And there's this like odd dynamic that's going on. She described it as just feeling out of body and feeling really hard to hold both. And as a mother, I know that feeling, but as a human, I know that feeling. Like, to be grateful and grieving is so real, is so human. And I think it's really important that we look at both, because they can both teach us something.
So I'm quickly interrupting this episode to invite you, if you're ready to start your manifestation journey, or if anything you've heard in our manifestation episodes has piqued your interest, to begin. We have a la carte workshops in everything from the basics bundle, which is what we recommend to everyone who starts. It's the formula that actually teaches you how to manifest, unblocked inner child, and unblocked shadow. We also have a la carte workshops on love and money. But the real gem is the Pathway membership because it encompasses every single workshop we have. It's a year-long membership with full access to the few a la carte offerings we have and exclusive workshops not available anywhere else, such as the daily practice, which is what everybody in the Pathway uses, hopefully at least 3 times a week to daily, in order to truly create the new neural pathways that one needs in order to manifest, and houses the library of our deep imaginings, which is our unique hypnosis process that allows you to get into your subconscious and overwrite those old neural pathways, creating the new ones. You can use our special code, EXPANDED, all caps, EXPANDED, to receive $20 off your first a la carte workshop purchase or $20 off your first month of the Pathway. Again, that's all caps, EXPANDED, EXPANDED. Okay, now back to the episode.
Had written something of trying not to have shame for having duality in your emotions. How do you try to practice releasing some of that shame? Because, in even the story you just said, I imagine she probably feels like, well, I should feel so much joy because we're on the other side of it. And yet there perhaps could be shame for feeling grief and sadness, even, being on the other side of it. How do we not shame ourselves for feeling both?
Something I ask myself is, will this nurture and support my highest self? Will this shame make me feel better about myself? And 10 times out of 10, the answer is no. And so I'm a big believer in choice. I choose to put the shame down. And I also choose to look at it like, why am I feeling ashamed about this? And wallowing in shame is not going to make me feel good. And so I want to feel good. So what makes me feel good? And quite literally, because I'm a writer, I will write down the question, what makes me feel good? And just make a list of the things that make me feel good. What makes me feel not so good? Make another list. Shame will be at the top. Guilt, childhood trauma. The lists can go on. And so I think visualizing for me, not only as a writer, but as a teacher, has helped so much because then we're able to see the things in front of us. Shame is normal. And also we can shift away from shame and find something that will be more supportive for our acceptance and growth and understanding.
I love the reframe of the choosing something other than shame. Because in even that phrasing of it, choosing other than shame, you're not saying, I don't feel shame, I'm going to ignore it. You're not sort of like spiritually bypassing, I feel good all the time. Like you're not doing any of that. You're really acknowledging its existence and saying, okay, I see you here, and I'm going to move forward towards something that's going to make me feel good.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a hard one.
Oh my goodness, so hard. Self-choosing over shame. Wow, big choice.
Do you find when shame or limiting beliefs or any of these sort of doubts that play out in our head from old stories that may not be aligned with who we are now or what we believe in or what we're striving towards or what we really are at our core, at least for me, I find that they are voices from childhood so often. If I really look at them, I'm like, oh, I'm assuming that's something a parent would say to me, or I'm assuming that's something a peer would say to me. It's not even my voice.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that?
I do. And that's something that I'm unlearning now as a 32-year-old. Like, whose voice is that? And like asking that question, whose voice is that? Is that mine or is that someone else's? Whose thoughts are those? Are those mine or are those my mother's? Whose beliefs are those? Are those mine or are those my grandmother's? And the reframing and relearning, I feel like is really hard as adult people because It's like we have to unlearn everything that we thought we knew to be true. And that's another, burden that we carry. And I'm trying to look at unlearning as a sacred process more than a scary one, because I think that if I look at it as sacred, and if I believe it as sacred, the unlearning, I can really see the beauty and the gratitude in the relearning.
It also kind of leans into the idea of when you heal yourself, you're healing your lineage.
Yeah. I say that often, like that is a choice. That is a big choice to lean into. When you healing yourself so that you can heal your lineage, wow, it's a big, big task. And it's extremely rewarding, I think.
What does that mean for you? How does that present? Do you find it's, well, I guess I already know the answer. I was going to say, do you find that it's any act of healing that helps it? Yes, it does. But also, do you feel ever there's certain themes within your particular family and your circumstances that you've been through that, like, okay, there are certain pieces of this that might be a little bit more challenging than others, and I'm, up for the challenge to looking at these things?
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest thing for me is not trying to force other people to do their work. Because as I heal, what I found is that when I'm deep in my healing, I want everybody to be deep in their healing. Like, how can we all just be on this wave together? And when I say all, I'm really talking about like my mom, my grandmother, my family, as far as like the people who raised me. And I was getting so frustrated because I was the only one doing my work at one point. And I'm like, I'm not going to be able to be in relationship with y'all because I'm changing and you're not. And it's literally driving me mad because the boundaries that I'm setting, you're not honoring. The way that I'm living my life isn't aligned with how you're living yours. And like, don't you want to heal? Don't you want to like put some stuff down and not be carrying misery and pain and loneliness and trauma and not be resting there? Like, it is extremely frustrating to be the matriarch of healing in your family, to be the matriarch of healing in your lineage, because so often people just won't get it. And then you'll get questioned, or you may even backtrack more, because if no one else around you is changing and you're the only one changing, it takes a lot of guts to choose to keep changing. It can be very lonely and isolating. And so when I stopped worrying about everyone else's healing and started only focusing on mine, that's when I was able to see the difference, because just by my actions of healing myself, my mother was watching, my grandmother was watching, and leading by example looks like letting people make their own decisions and letting people look to you as inspiration to do something or to not do something. My mom just started doing her work, I would say, over the past like 5 years, like her deep soul work. And the past 3 years have really been transformative for her. And she said to me, "You inspired me to change." And I was just like, well, there we go. When you stop trying to force things on people and you just start being the change that you want to see, quite literally, it can happen.
What a healing moment to even just hear that from your mom. How did that feel, hearing that you inspired healing in your mother, given the relationship that the both of you had?
It felt good. It felt good because we had done a lot of healing as mother and daughter relationship goes already. I think there's a difference between doing individual healing and doing collective healing. So when she made that statement, I was actually really proud of her. We were at a point where it just was beautiful for me to hear that. And also like, wow, that's really great that she's been watching me in this way.
How do you feel like through your own being a parent and being a mother has impacted your relationship with your mother?
It has shown me so much about healthy boundaries and about liberation and about choosing to make room for my children to be who they are and have autonomy. It also encouraged me to be more intentional about making them feel seen, safe, and supported because I didn't have that growing up. So, taking my trauma from childhood and my tumultuous relationship with my mother at one point, for most of my life actually, taking that and using it as a teaching moment for both how I wanted to be in relationship with my kids, but how I wanted to be in relationship with her. And like, what do healthy boundaries look like here? Especially as I'm mothering, my daughters, and they have a relationship with my mother. They love their grandmother. And so like, what dynamics need to shift and change? And it's interesting because thinking about mother-daughter dynamic, it wasn't until my mom and I started relating to each other as women and not as mother-daughter that our relationship got better. When I became a woman, like that just changed the game. It started to change the game for us, I think.
Why do you think that was? I wonder if it had anything to do with because you were a woman, you were self-nurturing yourself. So perhaps it was like you didn't need to look to her as much to provide those things.
It's so funny. I was just having this conversation with a friend of mine yesterday. When I made the choice to reparent myself, to mother myself, when I started meeting older women who stepped into mentor and mother roles for me, it really shifted how I engaged with my mother. And I would say for the better eventually, because I could see her as a woman, not just as a woman who brought me into this world, but as a woman with her own baggage and flaws and shortcomings and trauma. And so when I was able to acknowledge her as a woman outside of motherhood, through my actions in doing so, I think she started being able to do the same. And I will never forget, my husband's mother told me, we were talking about my mom, and I was really upset with just how I was raised. And it was extremely triggering being a part of my husband's family because he was raised so different than I, and from such a loving home and loving siblings and a loving mother. And just like, it was very triggering for me to even be a part of their family because the love was so big. And I remember her telling me, your mother is just a woman, just like me and just like you. And she wasn't saying it to excuse, she was saying it as fact. And so I have carried that with me. We had that conversation. I was 24, maybe 25. And I carry that because when we take people off pedestals, when we lower the, throne we have our parents on and we see them as humans and people with their own stuff, we can then decide from a more clear perspective and a more open heart and mind if we want to continue being in relationship with them. And that was a big thing for me too. Like, do I want a relationship with my mother? The answer ended up being yes. And so I had to start shifting, and so did she. And she was willing. So I will say I am pretty blessed in that way because I know there's a lot of mothers who are not willing to shift or change and to acknowledge. Granted, it took her a while, but she still did, and she still is changing and shifting and growing and adjusting. And so there's a lot of, difference there. But yeah, work in progress when it comes to motherhood, being a daughter, and having a mother. It's like a big thing.
Oh, yeah. I think of my own relationship and friends' relationship with their parents as well. And I think there's a period in which you have the realization, like you're saying, where, okay, they are just a human. And we know that. But unless we're ready to acknowledge they are just a human and I am now responsible for my well-being, there's almost like a grief on the loss of childhood at that point, when you realize, well, if they're just a human and they're not supposed to make sure all my stuff's okay because now I'm in my 30s and or whatever age you may be, there's such a processing period of, okay, so things maybe didn't go the way I desired, and maybe I'll never get my needs met by this person in that way. How can I move forward?
I think that's it. For me, learning to live with certain disappointments has been an act of radical acceptance. Like my mom and I have had conversations about, her not being able to be the parent that she wanted to be. She didn't have the tools. She didn't have the patience. She didn't have it. And so as painful as that was until I turned 30, I was still working through deep, deep trauma. As painful and disappointing as that was, I cannot go back to my childhood and make her something that she was not. But I can look at her for who she is today. And I think that's where grace comes in. And that's where the choice to offer grace comes in. Like when you choose to be in relationship with someone, you want it to be a healthy relationship. You don't want it to be one that's rooted in grudges and disappointment and anger and pain. And for a long time, that's how I was relating to my mother. And so our relationship was not getting better because I was mad at her. I was hurt by her. But that radical acceptance piece of, yes, that happened, and this is how I want to move forward. And having someone be open to moving forward with me and open to acknowledging their mistakes, which took a very long time. That didn't happen until last year. I turned 31. That didn't happen until I turned 31, having that conversation of the I'm sorry conversation. And so it's just all a process and a choice. And it doesn't have to be the choice to continue a relationship. I know that this won't resonate with everyone. You can also choose to step away. It just depends on the situation, on the people, and on the longing.
I love that you said too, you can choose to step away, because I feel like so many people think it's a given. They must continue the relationship in some way, shape, or form with their family, all of different family members, and I think you really have to tune into your own, where you are on that healing journey and say, okay, is this too much for me right now? Do I need space? And you are totally allowed to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So it's so heavy.
Oh, it is. But your writing and how you speak to it, and even your energy and speaking, is so healing and so light in such heavy topics. So I just have to acknowledge that, and just, it's like a warm heart hug hearing you speak.
No, thank you. And, I talk about all of this that we're talking about in After the Rain, like literally all of this. And so it wasn't easy writing that book. But I think when we face the things that scare us, we can start the forward journey and whatever that looks like for us.
One sort of ending note before we'll let everyone know where they can find all of your work and everything you have going on. So obviously your work is so incredible and impactful to everyone in their life, in their healing journey, but specifically for Black women in their healing journey. What is something that you might say to a younger version of yourself who's out there that might feel lost, who is dealing with trauma, who's looking to find their voice? What sort of message or tip would you want to share with them?
Well, I would tell my younger self that it can get better tomorrow. Yeah, I would tell her that, because for a very long time, I was extremely suicidal and just sad and just lost in the most painful way. And I did not think my tomorrows would get better. And I remember in meditation earlier this year, actually, I remember ending my meditation saying, I'm so glad I'm here. And so for anyone, for young Black girls everywhere, for any woman, man, person listening, no matter their race and ethnicity, no matter their socioeconomic status, no matter what they're struggling with, is that better days can come tomorrow. We just have to choose to move through them and through it and to put ourselves first so that we can grow and change and learn. And it's hard. So I'm not going to sell a dream like, oh, tomorrow is just going to be so good. No, tomorrow might be just as hard as today. But I much rather would experience the hard days of tomorrow than to not be here at all. And I didn't used to have that sentiment.
Oh, I love that. What an ending note. So how can people connect with you further? Obviously, After the Rain, your most recent book is just so incredible, such a journey. And we didn't even dive into it in this episode, but a lot in purpose and shifting career paths. And I know a lot of our audience is in that as well. And really the steps of healing. So highly, highly recommend that. And you're also doing breath work and community work. Talk a bit about where everyone can find you.
Oh my goodness. So all of the things can be found on alexelle.com. Every week I have a gratitude meditation that comes out on the app called Ritual. And that's been really supportive for the community. Every second Sunday, I host free breathwork Zoom classes. We just sit and I lead a guided meditation and breathwork meditation, and we dive in together collectively. My teacher in residency program at Savannah in Arizona will start on December 29th through the 5th of the new year. And then from then on, I'll be at Savannah every quarter for 2 weeks at a time, teaching breathwork and writing practice. So yeah, books can be found everywhere books are sold. Of course, I'm on Instagram, Alex_Elle. And maybe I'll just send y'all my link tree to put in the episode notes, and people can just go there and subscribe to the newsletters and subscribe to the YouTube and all the things, because there are lots of community resources that I'm offering, and I'd love to be in community with y'all.
Oh, yes. Love it. We'll put all the links in the show notes. It was such an honor and a privilege to get to have you on today. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and wisdom, and so excited for future healing for you and for all.
Thank you. Thanks, Jessica. This was really great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into the episode, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, we did. And in case you're not totally ready to join the pathway yet, I wanted to share a few of our free offerings that I'll often suggest to people as a little bit of a blueprint to get them started on their manifestation journey. The first place I like to direct people completely for free is the motivation. You can see it linked below or on our homepage as our testimony library. And it's categorized by different subjects, whether you're calling in career, money, love, wellness, and much more. When you're reading about a member's experience of what they manifested, you're actually seeing to believe and showing your subconscious that that very thing is possible for you. The second place I like to direct people is to the free clarity exercise, which is also linked below. In it, you get to try our own unique hypnosis process, learn about the science, and some journaling prompts. And the best part about this, you'll get a tiny taste of what it's like to go into your hypnotic state, bring your subconscious forward, and create new neural pathways while receiving clarity. And the third thing, if you haven't listened to it on this podcast yet, please go back to the episode titled Manifestation 101, where you'll learn the basics of neural manifestation to truly understand this process. So go ahead and check out those free resources, the motivation, the free clarity exercise, and the episode Manifestation 101, all linked below. And in an effort to make sure to have representation in this process series, go ahead and submit any process testimonials you have, especially to our LGBTQ+ community, our BIPOC, as well as the Ys, which is anyone in the community who is 45 and over. All right, we'll be back next week.